Hello, my name's Bev and I'm the author of the book Please Eat, A Mother's Struggle to Free Her Teenage Son from Anorexia, which describes our family's battle with the deadly eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which my teenage son Ben developed back in 2009 when he was just 15 years old. I have now uploaded my videos of my blog posts from 2011 almost in their entirety. I've missed out a couple of ones that weren't really relevant, but mainly it's every single blog post that I have read here. And thank you to anyone who's followed me all the way through. I'm about to kick off with the first blog post of 2012, January 2012. 2012 was the year that Ben would be discharged from CAMHS, not because he'd recovered 100%, but because he'd reached the age of 18, and unfortunately CAMHS, being a child and adolescent mental health services, only treats young people under the age of 18. So in a way, to have a few extra months, well, Ben was 18 because he'd been 18 in the December just past, was actually a bonus, but it wasn't great being with the treatment ending, but also the psychiatrist was leaving, so I guess, it was going to be a different treatment team anyway, whether Ben had stayed with CAMHS or whether he'd moved up to adult services. 2012 was also the year that Ben resat his AS level exams, which he hadn't done too well in the lower sixth form because of the way the eating disorder took up most of his time and energy. And it was also the year that Ben would sit his A levels and hopefully get the results he needed to get him into his first choice of university, onto his first choice of course. And if that happened, then he would be starting university in September 2012. So an awful lot happening in 2012. And if you're the parent of a young person who has an eating disorder and you're wondering whether or not they could cope with going away to university, you might find the posts from 2012 quite helpful. So please do follow me through these posts as I read them and upload them onto YouTube. Also, I must say that I'm going to take a little break this coming week, so there'll be a week without any posts uploaded for the simple reason that I'm not going to be here. I'm going away. I'm going down south to a funeral, actually. Nothing to do with eating disorders, but I'm taking the opportunity to take myself off with my bicycle to the southwest and do a bit of cycling. So I won't be uploading any more posts until I get back, which is in a couple of weeks' time. Anyway, this post is from the 2nd of January 2012, and it's called, "So, someone asked me recently, what role has Ben's dad played in all this? I'm aware that I don't often mention my husband and his role in helping our teenage son Ben to recover from anorexia. That's mainly because for the first year or so he was working away from home. Poor bloke, all he ever got was grief over the telephone as we lurched from one crisis to another. I'll phone Dad was a threat I'd use when Ben's behaviour got completely out of control. Not that it did any good, and it only upset his dad too, who, no doubt, felt pretty helpless on the other side of the country. At first I felt as if Ben's dad was blaming me for the eating disorder. He still believes that Ben has my dad's OCD-like gene, if you like, which, for some reason, I tend to take personally, although that is ridiculous. On bad days I'd respond with, 'Well, what about your family's mental health problems?' Of course, none of this was helpful to anyone. When Ben's dad was at home, it was fantastic to have support in the house.
Managing an eating disorder as what was in effect a single parent most of the time was a tremendous strain. Mind you, when he returned, we'd often end up having a massive row, eating disorder induced, of course. But at least with Ben's dad around, I was able to take time out now and again. This almost always took the form of me fleeing from the house because I couldn't bear the eating disorder atmosphere any longer. Box of tissues in hand, sometimes with cookies or chocolates for company, and I'd drive out to no place in particular, knowing that at some point I'd have to return home to the eating disorder. Or I'd retreat to my bed in tears and stay there like some kind of protective foxhole while Ben's dad dealt with the latest eating disorder rage or whatever it was. From a learning curve perspective, Ben's dad read one book on eating disorders, but after that it was down to me to pass on what I had learned. At one point we were getting mixed messages. Our treatment team, CAMS, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, was saying one thing, and yet other eating disorder connected people I knew were saying something else. Ben's dad lurched from favouring one school of thought to favouring the other. Then he'd accuse me of spending too much time with my cronies, as he called them, the around the dinner table forum for parents and carers of young people with eating disorders. See below for a link. Despite it proving a lifeline for me. What do they know, he'd ask. But then he met up with some of them and changed his opinion. So sometimes we were singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, and at other times we were at cross purposes. Despite me telling him over and over again that we as parents are not to blame for Ben's eating disorder, he'd often wail, "Is it something we've done? Is it something I've done? Maybe I should have spent more time with him and it would never have happened." Or he'd accuse me of being too soft with Ben and mollycoddling him, resulting in the eating disorder. Sometimes he felt Ben's school was to blame and we should have sent him to the rough local comprehensive, which, quote, would have knocked some sense into him, unquote. As I learned more about eating disorders, I do my best to explain that none of these things caused the eating disorder. It probably would have happened however Ben was brought up, whether or not his dad had to work away from home, and whatever school he'd gone to. Ben's dad did find it harder to manage the eating disorder when I wasn't there. For instance, the couple of occasions when he took Ben to see his parents down south. And both of us went through periods where we felt we simply couldn't cope or go on. Thankfully, these periods didn't coincide, so we were able to support each other to a certain extent. On one occasion, Ben's dad felt so stressed by an early morning eating disorder rage that he was involved in a near-fatal road accident. So on the whole, I have tried to keep the worst of the eating disorder from him. After all, he's been the primary breadwinner during this horrible journey and needed to be able to keep a relatively eating disorder-free head at work. I whittled my own self-employed business down to just a few hours a week months ago, so for me, eating disorder management has become my full-time job. But strangely, this has meant that sometimes he feels left out. Ben and I have become such a strong team during the past few months as we've forced the eating disorder out of his life that it's brought us tremendously close. Ben's dad has missed out on this and he feels a bit alienated. Despite trying to keep him up to speed with progress, Ben's dad still interprets certain behaviours and comments as eating disorder fueled when they are not, so I have to put him right. But all in all, we've managed to get through this together and emerge as a reasonably strong unit of three: Ben, his dad, and me, thank goodness. And that's the end of that post. Thank you for listening. You'll find a link below to my blog,
And you'll also find a link to my website where you can download free PDFs of my blog, and also a link to Amazon where you can buy a copy of my book.